Shri Shri Radha Ramadan, Gita Nagari Ki Jai, Shri Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assigned devotees. All glories to the assigned devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gaura. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. So I thought I would use as a little launching pad into today's topic, which is called Dependence, Independence, and Interdependence. I thought I would start with a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 29, talks between Narada and King Prachinavarti, and this is text 26 and 27. So, here Narada says to King Prachinavarti, the living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune. But when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body and, for the interest of the body, becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. So I just wanted to highlight a few sentences from Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Prabhupada says, the living entity's constitutional position is very minute, and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master. And when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Sometimes he is a failure, and sometimes he is successful. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. So how are we trying to compete with the Lord? Who can say? Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that there's certain ways in which the living entity is trying to compete with him. So much so that we set up our own business. Shiva Ramprabhu.
Being at the center, to put myself in the center of the activity.
Putting myself in the center, okay, that's a general disease, but what are the more covert ways by which we're doing so?
Trying to enjoy Krishna's energy.
We want to be the enjoyer. What else?
Controller.
We want to be the controller. What else? We want to be the proprietor. And what else?
Protector. The protector.
The protector. Best friend of everyone. Suridam Sarvabhutanam. So Krishna says there in the Bhagavad Gita, this is how we're trying to compete with him. And Prabhupada says, the living entity is so much trying to compete with Krishna that he sets up his own business. So, Pomdraka Incorporated. Business here in the material world. So, Prabhupada continues, there are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position. But to become like the Lord is not at all possible. Thus, there is a great struggle for existence with the material world, as different parties try to imitate the Lord. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. So, we've set up business in the material world, and there's keen competition between the businesses. As we set up a business in the material world, you, I, each and every one of us, it doesn't take us long to learn that I'm not succeeding at imitating the Lord. So what happens in business when your business is not really going so well? And you have many competitors, like maybe you set up a restaurant or something and there's like 12 restaurants on the same block. So your business is not going too well because not only are we competing with Krishna, but now we'll just forget, he's taken out of the picture. Now we're competing with each other of who can imitate Krishna, take his position. So what do you do in business when there's too much competition and you just, Merger, exactly. So then we create mergers. And what started off as little old me trying to compete with Krishna and little old you trying to compete with Krishna, now that circle of selfishness increases its circumference, its radius, whatever. So now that circle increases and we make mergers with each other. And what do we call those mergers? We call those families, right? Societies, communities, nations, what have you. We just keep merging more and more onto the circle here, and pretty soon our circle of selfishness has expanded into what's called extended selfishness in the form of families and communities, until it gets to be a very huge circle on the level of nations or mankind or whatever it may be. So when we're in this process of creating mergers with each other so that we can be in business together to compete with Krishna, in order for this business to run smoothly, we have to create social systems for it to run smoothly. And in every social system, one of the key aspects of a social system is its economic system. In fact, the social structure defines what kind of economy that social structure will have. So Prabhupada said in the purport that sometimes the living entity is influenced by the mode of goodness, sometimes passion, sometimes ignorance. Similarly, our mergers or our communities or societies are influenced by these three modes. And depending on the three different modes of nature that we're influenced by, it'll dictate what kind of economy, what kind of socioeconomic atmosphere we exist in. So we're going to discuss a little bit about three types of socioeconomic structures that exist to illustrate how our competition with Krishna manifests in this material world. And then after giving an overview of that, those different types of socioeconomic structures, then I want to move into what were Prabhupada's instructions or desires for the devotees living in this material world, how we're supposed to organize ourselves to succeed in getting cured of our disease from competing with Krishna. So perhaps we'll start with the mode of goodness. That's a good place to start. As time progresses through Kali Yuga, the mode of goodness continues to diminish and the mode of ignorance continues to increase. So we'll begin with the mode of goodness. So traditionally, cultures that were in the mode of goodness. Well, first let me say that the reason we're talking about this is because the socioeconomic structure actually will dictate or define what kind of relationships exist between the participants in that socioeconomic structure. That's why we're discussing this, because the topic is relationships. So first we'll begin with the mode of goodness. That traditionally we find that societies or communities that were influenced by the mode of goodness, their economic structure was what's called a subsistence economy. So subsistence economy means basically the participants, willingly or unwillingly, basically follow the rules of the Ishopanishad, which state that one should not take for themselves more than what is set aside as their due quota, and one should not take anything above that because you're stealing from others if you do so. And that if one lives in this manner, one can live like that for hundreds, and it is sustainable. One can live like that for hundreds and hundreds of years and not incur karma, individually or collectively. So these communities, which are based in the mode of goodness, then, their economic structure will reflect that mode of goodness. So what do we find in economies which are in the mode of goodness? We find that the individuals are not competing with each other for the natural resources. In such a mode of goodness socioeconomic structure, the individuals are all taking only that which they need for their subsistence, and everything is considered like communal. The resources, the animals, the nature, vegetation, etc., everything is used only according to what one's needs are, and nobody claims ownership or proprietorship over land, over resources. Even one's work, the fruit of one's work, is not considered mine. Rather, the fruit of one's work is considered to be shared with the whole community. The economic system is one of what's called gifting, that I may do something for you, either give you some kind of product that I've produced or render some kind of service. And I'm not doing that with this calculative mentality that now you have to give me the exact exchange, but rather, whenever you choose to reciprocate, either with goods or with services, it comes on its own. So in this way, the economic system would be called gifting. And everyone would do their functions, whatever service or production one does, in a very cooperative and mutually respectful manner. Somebody might be making shoes, somebody else might be making clothing, somebody else might be teaching, somebody else might be cleaning, whatever. everybody's duties are interrelated. So this kind of socioeconomic structure breeds what's called interdependent relationships. So interdependent means just like the parts of the body. If one part of the body fails for whatever reason, say your liver fails, it's not just the liver that is going to suffer, but every cell of the body will reap the repercussions of that disease. So it actually behooves all the parts of the body to help each other stay really healthy and strong, free from disease. That's what interdependency means. If one part goes down, then they all go down. If one part is raised, then they all are raised. So this interdependent subsistence type of socioeconomic structure would breed relationships that respect each other for their contribution to society. One's worth was not how much money they made or something like that, but what one's actual qualities were, what their role in society, what their contribution to society was. So their social contract between humans and humans, or humans and animals, was actually based on a mutual sense of responsibility. One would not find, old age homes where people stuff their old parents to get them out of the way. One would not need social security to take care of each other, but rather relationships in such a socioeconomic structure would breed cooperative responsibility for each other at all stages of life. So in such a community, it's still a material community because it's influenced by the mode of goodness. One would still go through the stages of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And in that first stage of dharma, one would actually perform their duty with real sense of duty, only because of the sense of duty, that this is my contribution to society. And then one would reap artha, or economic benefits, as a community. And then kama meant not, fulfilling all my desires, but kama meant just fulfilling my needs. Just fulfilling my needs. And then moksha, such a community, such a social structure, naturally lent itself to the idea that there's something more than this. Now we've lived our life in such a way, what's the next step? Because sustainability means we're thinking of the future, not just for ourselves, but for others. And then what's after this, demise of the body, called death? So that's the social structure in the mode of goodness. So then we can look at the social structure, socioeconomic structure, when now the mode of passion develops. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the mode of passion is miserable. It gives rise to
competition, hard endeavor,
lust. Right? By contact with the mode of passion, lust manifests. And how does Krishna describe lust? Without kind of like, because it's our greatest enemy. It is the destroyer of the world. So it's the greatest sin and the greatest destroyer of the world. So now time has progressed, so now passion, which gives rise to lust, has entered our social structure. So now what kind of economy do we have? In such a social economic structure, one has what's called competitive economics. So in this scenario of competitive economics, the playing field is level, but instead of having an equal vision where everybody equally gets what they need, now the playing field is level, but some of us have advantages over others. Some of us are stronger, some of us are more intelligent, some of us are more capable, more talented, whatever it may be. So although the playing field is level, each of us come to that playing field with different talents or abilities. So now the rule is, may the best man win. It's struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. One's worth is judged by how much one accomplishes, how much one acquires, how much one produces. And now the economic system is no longer like an agrarian economy. Back in the mode of goodness, the economy was an agrarian economy. It was not a money economy. That was an important point that I failed to mention. The mode of goodness socioeconomic structure was an agrarian economy, so that the mode of exchange was the produce that was produced, the grains in particular. So everybody had a common interest in that. But now when we move to the mode of passion, in such a social structure, now money becomes introduced. I no longer do something for you because I just want to do something for you. Now when I do something for you, it's not my duty to do something for you, but rather it's a means by which I can acquire money. If I do something for you, or I give something to you, you have to, not that you might, but you must. You must reciprocate with an equal amount of what we've determined is the equal amount of money to compensate for that gift or that service that I gave. So in such a structure then, relationships are no longer, I'm doing this for you out of just a sense of interdependent duty, but rather we each acquire a false independent mood. Now, instead of sharing resources, the land, etc., communally, now there's privatization of property. You have that property down the street because you happen to make a lot of money, so you could afford such a property. I only make a little bit of money, so I just have this little shed over here, or maybe I rent from somebody, whatever. So now disparity has been introduced. It's not that everybody is getting what they need. Some people, just due to their karma or whatever, competition by others, they don't even get what they need. Although they work just as hard as the next guy who gets way more than they need. So in this kind of socioeconomic structure, where money is the basis of exchange, competition is the rule, we develop false independent natures. Because I'm no longer interdependently connected with you. Now it's each man for himself. I have to go out and earn money for me and my family, and you have to go out and earn money for you and your family. And at the end of the day, we have nothing to do with each other. We have our independent property, our independent bank accounts, our independent standards of living. So in such a society, dharma, artha, karma is still there. But now dharma, the duty that we perform, is no longer motivated by just a sense of duty, but it's motivated by, well, what can I get out of it? I'll do this duty, no problem, if there's a dollar sign. at the other end of it. But if there's not some money coming back for it, well, why should I do that? You know, time is money after all. I'll be losing money. And then there's artha, but no longer in the form of food grains and, you know, the milk of cows, but now in the form of paper currency, which has no gold to back it up anyway. So it's just paper, cheating paper. And then kama becomes not just my needs, but also my wants. And those wants are competing with other people's wants. So now there's competition for resources, etc. And maybe there's some thought of moksha, but usually it's just save me from my sins. Because I realize that in this competitive socioeconomic structure, I've probably stepped on a lot of people's heads and their toes and what have you. And I've probably committed a lot of sins. So salvation, please save me from my sins, is about as far as the idea of moksha goes. So both capitalism and communism exemplify this mode of passion. So then as time progresses, we get into the mode of ignorance. Society is now influenced by ignorance, and when that happens, the economic structure degrades into an exploitative structure. Now the playing field is no longer level. Now the playing field is actually tilted so that it gives an advantage to a certain section of society, and it gives a predetermined disadvantage to another section of society. So this is called vulture or predatory economics. And in such a society where this kind of economy exists, it's not possible, it's actually impossible. It's actually designed in such a way that it's impossible for everybody to get what they want, or to speak of what, you know, they can't even get what they need, but to speak of what they want. It's already been predetermined that some are going to perish in this kind of structure. One profits in this economic system at the cost of others. There's no other way to profit in such a system. It's no longer may the best man win, but now it's let the weak man be killed. Let him be annihilated and just like taken out of the way. This type of structure actually produces relationships which are called dependent relationships. Why is it now dependent? In the mode of goodness, we cultured interdependent relationships. In the mode of passion, we cultivated independent, false independent relationships. And now in the mode of ignorance, this cultivates dependent relationships. Why? Because the mass of people will be in the category of what's called wage slaves. Anybody recognize that? Wage slaves. We become wage slaves. We no longer are doing a job which is a contribution to society. We may be doing jobs which are totally worthless, which actually might even be working towards the, moral demise of society. Sound familiar? We may be doing jobs that we morally don't really feel good about, but we have to do them. Like an animal that's bound with a rope, and when the master pulls, he has to go there. He can't protest. So in such a socioeconomic structure, we become wage slaves to this very cheating and exploitative economy. And we're dependent upon somebody to give me some money in exchange for whatever slave work I may be willing or capable of doing. And if I'm not willing to do it, okay, you're out the door, but we've got 10 more to replace you. Because, like I said, the playing field is tilted. It's not possible for people to get, it's not possible for everyone to get what they need. So if you're not willing, then somebody else will replace you. So in this type of society, there's no more dharma. Nobody is doing their duty. Duty doesn't mean a job, a 9-to-5 job. Duty means, what is my responsibility to society? How can I contribute to society? So when we have this type of mode of ignorance, socioeconomic structure, there's no more doing duty to society. So it's not actually dharma, just to go to work and bring money home to feed the family. That's not our dharma. It's not a contribution to society. So, and there's no question of moksha, because in the mode of ignorance, it's like the animals, or worse than the animals. There's only matter and the laws that govern matter and nothing more. There's no seeing each other as spirit souls, so there's no question of life after death or something transcendental. So there's only artha and kama. And that artha, again, is really stolen money. We're cheating. Only by cheating others do we get it. And the kama is no longer just what we need and what we want, but it's about how much can I have? Even, it's about greed. That's what it's about. It's about greed. So this is not a sustainable socioeconomic structure. Obviously, because whereas needs have their limits, greed has no limit, right? Like Gandhi said, that the world has enough for each person's needs, but not even enough for one man's greed. That's the nature of greed. So I think if we look at today's world, well, let's take a vote. I won't want to make any assumptions. How many people want to vote that today's socioeconomic structure that we live in is influenced by the mode of goodness? Okay, very good. Zero hands. How many people want to vote that perhaps it's mostly influenced by the mode of passion? Okay, maybe 20% of people. And how about the mode of ignorance? Yeah. It's a pretty good mixture of passion and ignorance, but day by day, ignorance is overtaking even passion. So we're living, the reason we went through this exercise was to illustrate the nature of the material world that we're living in. Relationships require a substrate on which to grow. I don't know if they'd still do this in like biology classes, but at least way back when I was a student in biology class, we'd get these little things called agar plates. Did you ever do that, right? Agar plates are these little like glass plates with some kind of substrate in there, and you inoculate it with some different microorganisms. And that agar plate, the substrate might be at a certain pH, it might have certain chemicals in there, and when you would inoculate it with different microorganisms, a particular microorganism would really thrive in that environment. And you come back a couple days later with your microscope, and you'd find that microorganism A really thrived on that agar plate. Whereas the other microorganisms, they didn't like that environment, so they died. And then you take another agar plate, and the pH would be a little different, and the chemicals would be a little different, whatever it was. And now microorganism B really thrived, and all the other microorganisms didn't thrive. Similarly, we are like those little microorganisms. And the relationships that we have with each other can only thrive and be healthy when we're in a particular environment. So I want to now look at Prabhupada's conception of how he actually wanted devotees to live. And there's a reason why he wanted devotees to live in a particular way. And it's precisely this point, that loving relationships between devotees and between us and Krishna cannot actually develop properly, what to speak of thrive and expand into broader circles of the world to include others, unless the substrate on which we're trying to grow those relationships is of the proper pH, if you will, as the proper environment. So Krishna actually designed this world to be an interdependent structure. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says that if we perform sacrifice properly, then the demigods will be pleased. And what will happen when the demigods are pleased? There will be mutual cooperation between man and demigod. And what will happen? Prosperity will reign for all. He also explains in the 4th chapter that he made persons in this material world to be of 4 basic types or categories called the varnas. That we all have different working propensities, different types of ways. We all have one thing in common. What is that common dharma that we all have? Service. We all have something to contribute to society. But Krishna created us in such a way that in 4 different categories, as a Brahmana, as a Kshatriya, as a Vaishya, or as a Shudra, we can contribute to society. So in order for us to actually contribute to society, we need to develop our society of devotees, in such a way that we can work cooperatively and reach our desired goal. So currently, we find devotees living in the material world and taking part in what we all voted was a asuric social-economic system, right? This is the asuric system that we're living in. Now, how many people would like to raise their hand and say that I am so transcendentally situated that I am not at all affected by the demonic social economic system that I find myself in? Anybody want to raise their hand? So admittedly, we are affected by our environment. Now, Prabhupada would often say, make the best use of a bad bargain. This is probably one of the most misunderstood statements of Srila Prabhupada. When Prabhupada said, make the best use of a bad bargain, just like they say, if life hands you lemons, make lemonade. That's what make the best use of a bad bargain is. You get a bad bargain and you try to make something good of it. However, Srila Prabhupada did not say, keep your life in such a way that you're always getting a bad bargain. He didn't say, keep going back to the store and keep purchasing that same bad bargain. he said, okay, you have a bad bargain, make the best use of it. But now we're supposed to use our intelligence to figure out how to arrange things in such a way that we're no longer victimized by these bad bargains. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, there's two people in this material world. Does anybody know who those two people are?
Cheaters and cheated.
Cheaters and the cheated. And then he clarified that and he said, actually, of the two, they're both cheaters. Because we cannot be cheated unless we allow ourselves to be cheated. At first, we're innocent. We get cheated. Okay, once burned, twice shy. Learn your lesson. Okay, you got a bad bargain. Don't go back to the same store and get the same bad bargain. So, Srila Prabhupada makes a couple of statements here that I wanted the short statements. In 1973, one devotee was speaking to Prabhupada about the economic system. And he said to Prabhupada, the governments, they were talking about paper money and how it's just paper money. It's just like monopoly money, right? Like the kids' games or something. It's not worth anything. Sometimes it's not even worth the paper that it's printed on. That's how bad it is. So one devotee said to Prabhupada, the governments actually started the whole thing. They instituted paper money, and they instituted it because it is a cheating process. But everyone is participating. So it is just going on and on. That is the real cause of inflation. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's it. They are getting encouragement in their cheating business. So how many people want to encourage the asuric cheating business? We don't want to do that. Prabhupada also made a statement that this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto. A brahmana who teaches as a means of livelihood may often be curbed in his teaching, and one who performs sacrifice may be manipulated by materialistic worshippers. In this way, a brahmana may be placed in an embarrassing and compromised position. Therefore, a high-class brahmana or Vaishnava ultimately will depend completely on the mercy of the Lord for his maintenance. The Lord promises to sustain his devotee, and an advanced Vaishnava never doubts the word of the Lord. So that's just a couple of statements on devotees not taking part in the cheating process. So we can think of it like, I was thinking like a soccer game. Anybody here play soccer? Common thing for kids at least. So say there's a soccer match going on. You've got the blue shirts against the red shirts, and they each have their respective goals that they're supposed to shoot into. So somebody on the blue shirt team, they're supposed to shoot into the left-hand goal, and the right shirt people, they're supposed to shoot into the right-hand goal. Now, let's say one of the blue-shirted people who's supposed to be shooting into the left-hand goal, while the red-shirted people say, hey, come on, why don't you help us shoot into the right-hand goal? We'll even give you some money to do it. We'll give you $1,000 if you kick the ball into the right-hand goal. So now the blue-shirted person, instead of shooting into the left-hand goal, he turns around and shoots into the right-hand goal. Now, isn't he just defeating the whole purpose of the team that he belongs to? Oh, well, they gave me some money to do it. Well, does that make it proper? Oh, but with that money, I could contribute it to our team, and I could buy some more balls and some more uniforms. And no, that is not. He's not contributing to the team. Even though he's thinking, oh, if I take a bribe to shoot into the wrong goal, I'll take that money and I'll support the team with whatever clothing and food they need or what have you. No, this is not supporting the team. So what I want to turn to then is the idea that if we're not working to be a part of the solution, then what are we working for?
Part of the problem.
We're actually part of the problem. If we're not shooting our soccer ball into Krishna's, what do they call that thing? The goal? Or whatever, the goal. Then we're shooting it into Maya's goal. Right? So Srila Prabhupada actually wanted devotees to use their intelligence, their know-how, their capital, their organizational skills, their skills of labor, to figure out how we could develop a socioeconomic system, which he called Daivi Varnashram. A socioeconomic system in which devotees could actually live and work interdependently. Why? Well, A, so that we wouldn't be part of the Asuric system, which is cheating us like anything. And B, so that we could work interdependently to fulfill this desire of our acharyas to have a Daivi Varnashram system in this world in which all the participants would contribute to society materially by doing their duties, but most importantly, they would help each other to serve Krishna. That everything that is produced would be offered to Krishna. All one's efforts, all one's services, all one's production, etc., would be offered to Krishna. So sometimes we, maybe it's out of laziness, or out of ignorance, or what have you, or it could be just due out of, to be not informed. We feel that we are becoming Krishna conscious and developing relationships with devotees by remaining part of today's Asuric socioeconomic system. So now one has to ask, is that really possible? Is it really possible to develop such deep, interdependent, loving relationships in such a system? So I'm trying to argue that real interdependency requires, actually if you look the word interdependency up, it actually has an economic definition to it. Economists use that word more than anybody else does, especially in today's world where national economies are becoming more and more interdependent on each other, with globalization, etc. So the question is, how can we actually develop real loving interdependent relationships unless and until we develop a community in which that interdependency is both the foundation, it's required, it's necessary, and it's sufficient. It actually forms the basis of our community. We can come together and attend festivals or retreats or what have you, get-togethers, different satsangas here, there, and everywhere. But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't really need you, and you don't really need me. I mean, honestly, we don't really need each other because we have become victimized by this socioeconomic structure which we've been describing, which we all agreed was terribly influenced by the lower modes of passion and ignorance, which is actually of an Asuric character. So we, even as aspiring, Krishna Bhaktas, have actually become victimized in many ways by the system. So that we have our own private everything, isn't it? Even we live in so-called devotee communities, but everybody has their own car and their own washing machine and their own dishwasher, their own computer and their own... We don't even share anything in common practically. I've actually spoken to devotees who live in devotee communities, and they say, oh, my child gets bored, doesn't have anybody to play with, because the other devotees, they're doing their schedule, and their kids are doing something else, and I want to go out and run errands, and I don't even have something, whatever. It doesn't really work. So the point that I'm trying to make is, while we're here at Gita Nagari, it's a nice idea to meditate on, that Srila Prabhupada actually encouraged devotees, actually instructed devotees to really try to develop our loving relationships in an interdependent social structure. And sometimes devotees misinterpret that, his instructions on Daivi Varnashram, thinking, oh, we all have to go live on a farm and become farmers or something. It's not exactly what Daivi Varnashram means. Daivi Varnashram means a community with a culture of serving Krishna together to please Krishna, and to base our economic structure in such a way that we actually perceive the interdependency that we have with each other. And teamwork and interdependency are not exactly synonymous. We may have teamwork, like somebody does the arti and somebody cooks the offering, and somebody sweeps the floor, and somebody goes out and distributes the books, and etc., etc. But due to a lack of a common economic interest, real interdependency doesn't exist. It doesn't mean, therefore, we don't have friendly relationships or loving relationships. But the real goal of the Daivi Varnashram system is to develop very strong interdependent relationships, which means I cannot do without you and you cannot do without me. What the service I'm doing is not just a position that I can get fired and somebody else can be hired in my place. Rather, my contribution to society is very individual and unique. And your contribution to society is very individual and unique. In this way, real interdependent, loving relationships can develop. Now, there's two reasons why Srila Prabhupada wanted devotees to develop such Daivi Varnashram communities based on the land, based on an agrarian economy. Well, for one reason, he foresaw that this socioeconomic structure that we're living in was going to collapse real soon. He didn't expect it to last very long. And I think we all see that. If you read the newspapers, things are collapsing right before our very eyes. So the question is, what do we want to hand over to our children? If we're living in an economic system which is collapsing before our very eyes, why do we want to pass that on to our children or the next generation? I rode the conveyor belt down to its horrible destination, and now I want my children and the next generation to ride the same conveyor belt to the same disastrous destination. Why do I want to do that? So Srila Prabhupada wanted us to develop these Daivi Varnashram communities for two reasons. One was for the devotees. He understood that this material world is no place for a lady or a gentleman. And just for us to be able to survive materially, properly, he wanted such communities to be developed. And secondly, why he wanted these communities to be developed was because Srila Prabhupada noted, let me try to find that quote here. Srila Prabhupada was noting, yes, okay, here's a quote from Srila Prabhupada in 1977. This is just a few months before he left the world. Srila Prabhupada said, "In big scale, you cannot make all of them brahmanas or sannyasis. No, that is not possible. This is small scale. What percentage of people of the world are we attracting? Very insignificant. But if you want to make the whole human society perfect, then this Krishna consciousness movement should be introduced according to Krishna's instructions. If you want to do it in a large scale for the benefit of the whole human society. Now we are picking up some of them, the best. That is one thing. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, para upakar. Why only a certain section should be picked up? Let the whole mass of people get the benefit of it. But then it is required to be systematic. Therefore, we have to introduce this varnashrama dharma. It must be done perfectly. It is possible, and people will become happy. So Prabhupada was in this discussion, which was a longer discussion, was making the point that, yes, a few exceptional people will be able to remain a part of the Asuric culture, yet develop Krishna consciousness nicely. But out of his mood of compassion for the general mass of people, Prabhupada recognized and understood that in order for more than just a teeny tiny percentage of special people joining the Krishna consciousness movement, in order for a much larger percentage of the populace to become attracted to and engaged in the Krishna consciousness movement, he understood that we needed to develop the Daivi Varnashram communities that would show people by example how to do your function as a Shudra or a Vaishya or a Kshatriya or a Brahmana in such a way that we can live in a loving, interdependent way with each other, with no, competition between the classes and exploitation by the upper class over the lower class, to show people how they can use their work in such a way that they can be free from the influence of the Asuric community, culture, and dovetail their working propensities and be purified gradually, and make advancement in Krishna consciousness by contributing their efforts in a Krishna conscious society. So Prabhupada, also in 1974, there's a nice conversation with Prabhupada in which he was emphasizing that our motto, he said, is Sarve Sukhino Bhavana. This is Vedic civilization. Let everyone be happy. That is Vedic civilization. And the demonic civilization, they're thinking, let everyone suffer. I become happy. That's all. And Vaishnava is thinking, for my salvation, it is already guaranteed. But he is thinking, how these poor people will be saved. This is Vaishnava's position, Paradukaduki. He's unhappy by seeing others unhappy. He is very compassionate to fallen souls, Paradukaduki. This is Vaishnava philosophy. Vaishnava shall work hard, undergo all tribulation for others. He has no problem. A Vaishnava has no problem. Because he has taken shelter of Krishna, he has no problem. Krishna also gives guarantee. Anyone who has taken shelter of me, he is saved. I will give him protection. And then one more quote from Srila Prabhupada from 1974. Prabhupada was, again, displaying his mood of compassion and understanding that it's not possible for people to take to Krishna consciousness when the world is so chaotic and so disturbing. So Prabhupada said, so one side there is no rain, one side there is no rice, and one side heavy tax. So they'll be all confused. They have already become confused. So in the confusion state, it'll be very difficult to make them Krishna conscious. Therefore, preliminary help should be given, that they should not be in chaos and confusion. Otherwise, how the brain will work? A devotee says, yes, no one can give rapt attention without peace of mind. Remember that from the first canto? that one must hear with rapt attention, but without a pure mind, one cannot hear with rapt attention. So Prabhupada says, yes, our main aim is how to give them Krishna consciousness. But if they are already disturbed in every respect, then how they'll take it? Therefore, we are taking these subjects to help him to come to the Krishna consciousness. And this is the method, Varnashram. A devotee says, this is the most auspicious work for now? Is this remedial measure to stop the chaos in the world? Prabhupada, yes, most auspicious. Because if the people are in chaos, how they'll be able to accept the great philosophy? It requires cool brain. So, our retreat theme is expanding the circle, our circle of loving relationships. So Srila Prabhupada is pretty strongly making the point that if we really want Krishna consciousness for our children, for the next generation and next generation, if we want Krishna consciousness to be available to the general mass of people, then it actually really behooves us to develop and take part in a Daivi Varnashram community which can instill Krishna consciousness in all the participants. It can attract others to Krishna consciousness. Krishna means all attractive, so the living entity is supposed to be attracted to Krishna. But there's lots of clouds that block our vision of the bright sun of Krishna. So Prabhupada was saying, what are those clouds? Those clouds are all the chaos and disturbance that's going on in the world in the name of economic development, which is actually just an exploitative, predatory culture. So due to all these clouds of disturbance and chaos, people's minds are so disturbed that even you put the most beautiful, all-attractive Krishna in front of their face, they cannot recognize. And it's not because, oh, they're terrible people, they're not attracted to Krishna. It's because there's disturbance, there's an interference there. So Prabhupada really wanted, for us and for others, for such a community to develop. And this community, he called it Gita Nagari. So he saw it as the method for really developing our strong, interdependent, loving relationships. And when such strong, interdependent, loving relationships develop, then there's no question of falling into Maya. Because we will be so interdependent on each other that if one of us even starts to stray away off the path, there's no way we would allow that to happen. Spiritually and materially, we would feel such a responsibility towards each other. So, I guess I'll end there. I'm not sure I had everything covered, but that's the basic point that